live. Welcome everybody to the Crimson webinar on building an extracurricular profile. So today that's exactly what we'll be talking about. But first, I want to give just a little bit of background about Crimson itself. So our philosophy, of course, is to build the leaders of tomorrow. That means providing as much support as we can to help them make as big of an impact as possible in their communities and in their chosen fields. And we do that through a lot of support. So as you probably are aware, Crimson is an online education company, and we provide support in a number of different ways to help students achieve their best, most maximum potential. Of course, through extracurricular and leadership mentoring, which is what we'll focus on today, but in other ways as well, we provide academic tutoring, as well as university guidance, of course, and summer program selection. We'll touch on that a little bit later. Crimson also offers tours and student experiences. So lots of different ways to help our students out. You may have seen us before. We've been featured in a few different places. I'm sure you recognize a few of these different publications. My favorite, though, would be our YouTube channel. Quick plug for that, especially the Day in the Life series, because if for whatever reason you're not able to travel to the actual campus of a university, the Day in the Life series goes through, or it interviews students that currently attend those universities and gives you a little bit of insight into what it's like to go to school there. So if you can't travel for whatever reason, coronavirus maybe, it's a great way to check out a university while you're doing some school research. And our results. So across the board, Crimson students tend to do very well. As you can see here, some pretty impressive numbers, over 1,000 offers to top 50 universities. In general, we tend to target top 50 universities as much as possible. And Ivy League offers, some great numbers there. And if you're looking over towards the UK, Oxford and Cambridge, good results there as well. And some pretty impressive numbers for financial aid and scholarships in the millions of dollars. Definitely expecting all of these numbers to go up after the final results come in from this cycle as well. Probably wondering who I am. It's about time for my own introduction. My name is Brice O'Connell. After graduating university in my home state of Wisconsin, I worked as an educator in Asia in a few different countries, including as an elite college consultant for a Shanghai consultancy for a couple of years before returning to the US to work for Crimson. And I'm now a senior strategist for Crimson, helping students from all around the world do exactly what I'm about to talk about today. And I've helped many former students get into a number of different schools. You can see the list there of some of my favorites, but many more. And you'll hear actually from one of those students later today. So today we'll be talking about a few different things. First, I'll be going through an application overview because it's important to have the end result in mind as you're making choices and putting your profile together. Then, of course, we'll talk about different options, what's even available to you. Maybe you haven't heard of some of these options. But most importantly, next, we'll talk about how to choose from those options. Many times there are so many different options. It's hard to know what looks best, how to build the best profile. That will be the main focus of today. And then you'll hear a success story from Keenan himself. He'll talk about his experience and what led him to his current status as an incoming freshman to Columbia University. Then finally, we'll round it all out with a Q&A. So if you send in your questions, I'll be sure to get to as many of those at the end as possible. Great, let's get started. So, application, final product. You may have heard of the Common Application before. If you haven't, it is the portal through which you apply to the vast majority of United States schools. So more than 600 universities use this system, very convenient, but you can only apply for up to 20 at a time. I think that is a plenty high ceiling. There's no need to apply to 20 necessarily, but you can. The Common Application includes all the components necessary for admissions officers to review your application, which includes the biographical information about yourself and your family, and all of that, but as well as the essays. So one common application essay, 650 words, that gets sent to just about every school. Then each university will also, more often than not, require supplementary essays, and those can be about a range of different topics, plenty to fill an entire other webinar, of course. Then the activity list and awards list, will focus on that section today, and then your references. So some from teachers and your school counselor. And all of this gets submitted for your early decision schools in November, early action schools towards the end of December or 1st of January. And one bonus is that the common application rolls over. So if you were to open an account today, you wouldn't lose any work when the official App Cycle common application opens later this year. So save yourself some time, get started now. The activities section. So this is what we're talking about today, and it is arguably one of the most important parts of the common application, I would venture to say. Ultimately, everything you do outside of classes in high school will get distilled down to a top 10. And those top 10 will get further reduced to these tiny boxes that you see here. So the position that you hold within the organization, as well as the name of the organization, needs to fit into 50 characters. It doesn't sound like a lot, not 50 words, 50 characters, which is essentially enough to say, Vice President, Model United Nations. It's not a lot. So you need to make every character count. And then what you do in that activity as vice president or as a member of a club, all of that gets reduced to about 150 characters or less. So that's also not very much. It's certainly less than a paragraph. I would equate it to maybe 2 or 1.5 good sentences. But there's no need to describe everything in full sentences. This is where I would recommend going with the resume type description. Short, sweet, punchy, including as many numbers as you can and quantifying things, but primarily focusing on your impact. So don't describe what Model United Nations is, describe what you did within that organization and the accomplishments that you achieved. And then for awards, so you have a top 10 for activities and a top 5 for awards. And the awards section, it's just one box of 100 characters, which is also not very much. So be sure to word things very carefully, which is something I always help all of my students with. As you can see here, you also indicate what type of activity it is. So it can be academic, volunteer, many different options there. And then the grade levels that you participate in. Certainly participating in an activity for a long period of time looks great. But even if it's just for 1 year or for a summer, also perfectly fine. Okay. So you get to include a little more detail. There's no need to include everything in those 150 characters. You say when you participated in it, how many hours per week and weeks per year, and then whether you'd like to continue that activity in college. There's no right or wrong answer to whether you'd like to continue it in college, but generally speaking, I say if it's an activity that relates to your major specifically, you might as well tick yes. They will not follow you around campus to make sure that you are doing that, but it doesn't hurt to check yes. But of course, check no for the ones that are not possible to continue in college. All right, so here's an example. On the left there, under the blue guy, you can see sort of a more general description of involvement in a club. So of the art club for this instance. And there's not a lot being said there. It's more of a generic kind of involvement description, but on the right, you can see some numbers. You can see impact, growing the club membership from 4 to 20, raising a certain amount of money through fundraisers, and then any events that were organized. Of course, this is far too much to fit into 150 characters, but your strategist can help you distill this down into the punchiest 150 characters possible. Or be sure to do that on your own. So top 10, that's not a lot. 150 characters, certainly not enough to fill or to fit everything that you've done in a particular club, especially if you founded the club, you held a number of events, you raised a bunch of money. That's not a lot of room. Fortunately, there is an additional information section. I would say that this is the second most important part of the Common Application and largely an underutilized one. So this is where everything else can go, the sort of overfill, I guess. You have a lot more space to write, 650 words, I believe. And this is where you give context. So if there's a little bit more you need to say about a particular project or maybe some research, or your involvement within a club was so extensive that you need to provide more information, this is where it can go. Or you're busy, you've done more than 10 things, and you need to add, or you'd like to provide information about some of those extra activities. This can be a really clever way to quote unquote humble brag. So let's say your top 10 is filled with some fantastic things that you've done, so much so that the fact that you were class president couldn't even fit in your top 10. So putting class president very discreetly in the additional information section is a way to show that you've done so much that that activity wasn't even in your top 10. It's one of my favorite things to see on student profiles. It can also be a great place to list awards beyond your top 5. So some students are in clubs that are more award prone. Science type activities, lots of competitions there, many math competitions as well. Speech and debate, for example, that Keenan can attest to. Model United Nations, even a lot of opportunities for awards. So if you do have more than 5, you can certainly list them or describe your previous top 5 in the additional information section. Super useful section. It's completely blank. There's no prompts whatsoever. So it's entirely up to you to decide how to fill that. However, admissions officers are busy and their time is precious. So you don't want to fill it with things that aren't impactful. Make sure you make very clever, smart use of this section. So that's how it all comes together. Final or completed applications, samples can be found everywhere, but those are sort of the tips of filling everything out. Next, what do you fill it with? What are some options for your time in high school? First and foremost, it can be tempting to run out and join all of the clubs that you can because you need to fill that top 10 and the additional information section. But it's important to remember academics come first, tests come next, then extracurriculars in terms of what you should prioritize. So certainly focus on building out a rigorous schedule, make sure it's balanced, put in time to prepare for those standardized tests. They are important. For now, some schools are turning away from standardized tests, but the vast majority does use them as a valuable metric in evaluating profiles. Also, you'll see some tips there. Don't take classes for the wrong reasons. I would say it's most important to choose classes based around your interests, your majors. If you're challenging yourself in ways that you find valuable, success will certainly follow. And it's important to plan things early. The earlier you have a plan, the earlier you can likely achieve what's on that plan. After school activities. So here's where we get into how you can spend your extra time beyond classes, beyond homework, beyond tests. Lots of things you can do. Many of them are through school. So I'm sure some of these organizations you see here look familiar. Model United Nations, very popular, FBLA as well for business, Girls Who Code. A newer one, and there are many more computer science oriented organizations popping up. Very useful for students interested in those fields. NHS at just about every high school, and then Quiz Bowl. So lots of different options. But you don't have to limit yourself to activities that are sponsored by your school. You can certainly join organizations outside of school. You can form your own organization at the school. And another thing to target, if you're the competitive type, would be activities that offer competition. So I mentioned before, Model United Nations regularly holds delegations, conferences. that's a really great opportunity to start accumulating some accolades and really standing out from your peers. FBLA, regular competitions, DECA, another business organization, speech and debate, of course, lots of different ways to participate in competitions. Those are a great way to fill your activities and awards list, and they help you stand out through the admissions process because you've already stood out from your peers. You won something. And for awards, scale does matter. So, you know, winning something at the city level looks different compared to winning something at the national level. So it's important to keep in mind those things, but an award is an award. Certainly they're all useful. But most importantly, join something you're passionate about. If you join a bunch of clubs that you don't particularly care about, more often than not, admissions officers can see that. They can read your profile and they can either feel your passion or they can't. So it's best to be genuine, stick to yourself, stick to what's true to you, or if you don't see anything, like I mentioned before, make your own opportunity. Then there's also volunteering. So I get the question a lot, how many hours do I need to volunteer to get into X school? There is no magic number. There never will be a magic number, but volunteering is valuable because universities like to see that you care about your community, you're helping people that need it, you're giving back. But I would say that you shouldn't just volunteer blindly. It's always best for a number of reasons to choose a cause that's either close to you, maybe something that has affected your family or yourself personally, or maybe it's just a cause that you've really grown attached to. But beyond just collecting hours, having an actual impact within that organization is even better. So if there's an opportunity to be, you know, a team leader or a captain or organize an event yourself, those are things that look really great beyond just the collection of hours. So then there are jobs, internships, and research opportunities. Jobs, I get the question a lot, like, can I have a part-time job? Certainly you can, but be mindful how you use the money that you generate. So if you're just using it to go have fun and go on trips with your friends and things like that, that might not be the best use for it, but saying that you save it for college or that you're using it to start your own business or to fund an organization that you're forming, that's a great use of a part-time job. But of course, if you need a job to support your family, that's something that can be indicated on the common application as well. Internships and research. These can be very valuable, especially when they're within the field that you're targeting. So if you are planning to go into pre-med or biology, let's say, and you get an internship or research position with a biology professor or within some sort of organization that focuses on biology, that looks great. Certainly that's harder to obtain. Usually these positions are very competitive, but they can be very useful in demonstrating your interest in something very specific. And since it is rare, it stands out that much more. So I would say maybe 20–25% of my students secure some type of valuable research position. They will naturally stand out just a little bit more. But you shouldn't restrict yourself to research you can conduct with a professor. You can conduct your own independent research, write a paper on it. There's still very much a lot of value in that. Let's see, great opportunities here for internships and research, some great organizations. MIT RSI, excellent summer program that involves firsthand research, working closely with experts. You can also contact universities directly to secure research positions. Most of my students that have some type of research opportunity just cold emailed professors, wrote a professional email, offered their services. It takes a lot of emails sent to receive a positive response because professors are busy people. But once you do secure that position, it's very valuable. Summer camps and programs, talked a little bit about that. Really great way to demonstrate interest in something specific as well. There are some summer programs that are, say, more beneficial to your profile than others. So choosing one that is age appropriate and competitive better than choosing one that anybody can attend if they simply fill out the application and pay the fee. So the ones you see on the right are some of the better ones that we've picked out. MIT Launch, really great if you have business and tech interests. Telluride Association, arguably one of the best and most competitive summer programs in the country. Focuses more on humanities and discussions on current topics. Then there's also summer schools you can attend, Harvard, Stanford, or Interlocket, which is great if you have a passion in the arts, drama or theater or music. But they're not necessary. So many times they can be expensive, and there are plenty of ways to build your profile independently over the summer. But the main point is to not let your summers go to waste. They are a huge opportunity to focus almost exclusively on your extracurriculars, and you should do just that. Independent projects. So if you don't attend a summer program or don't secure a research position or an internship, you can absolutely do things on your own. I would say some of the strongest profiles of students that I've worked with have very impressive independent projects. So using your interest, expanding upon that, and using your interest in some way to help people, really great way to build an independent project. So for example, if you have an interest in neuroscience and you also play music, you can combine those two and create workshops for people that maybe would not otherwise have access to music education. And while you're at it, give them a little bit of information about how music affects your psychology and your well-being and your mental health. So though a series of workshops in that way could be a very successful project. But making sure that it's sustainable over time is also important. Something that continues ideally beyond your graduation from high school is better than something that's just one-off. But the options are endless for independent projects. Okay, so now that we've gone through some options, how do you pick? How do you know where to spend your time? What's worth your time? What are admissions officers looking for? I'll give you some tips on how to make some smart decisions. Again, prioritize academics and tests. I can't say it enough. If you have an amazing extracurricular profile and your academics are weak, certainly it can make up for it to some extent, but academics are a threshold. So first and foremost, universities are academic institutions. That's what they look at to gauge your likely level of success once you attend their school. So also, along with academics, get to know your teachers. As I mentioned before, you need those letters of reference. When you build those relationships with your teachers, it makes it that much easier when you ultimately have to ask them for that letter. And then if you're doing well in school, you get good grades, you understand content quite well. A great way to get experience and boost your profile is to tutor. So you can tutor or you can get tutoring, both ways. And ideally both are best. Tutoring is a common theme, a common activity that I see in many of my students' profiles. And most students that I work with also receive tutoring for either test taking or classes that are a bit harder. But once you've attained a certain level of success academically and with your tests, working on extracurriculars, best to be wise. Don't overload yourself. As I mentioned before, joining 100 clubs because they're all available and you need to build up that profile, not the best use of your time. As I mentioned before, it's all about impact. So choosing one or two main activities is advisable, since the more time you spend on something, the bigger your impact can be. So having those key activities is really useful. And then the others can be still impactful, but maybe a little bit less so. And we can call this well lopsided. So you're very targeted in one thing, but you have involvement in other areas as well. And ideally, where you are targeted should also relate to your chosen field by focusing on a passion. So as I've mentioned a few times, the more you're passionate about something, the better your involvement will be. You'll want to be more involved, you'll want to do more, you'll want to help out more. And colleges look for this, that you've displayed leadership and initiative by pursuing your passion. Right, and a successful EC is a combination of passion, time, effort, and leadership, and then impact. So have you left a lasting impact through your involvement? I would say, again, the most important thing to demonstrate through your activities, through your activity list, through your involvement is demonstrated interest. And by that, I mean in your major. So show, don't tell. Much like in your essays, you should be showing through descriptive language. Your activity list should do the same. So by just reading your activity list, they should be able to guess exactly what you want to do in college, what you want to study, where you want to spend your time. Just saying that you want to be a doctor without ever volunteering in a hospital or taking a first aid course is kind of a hard sell, especially for the more competitive majors. Demonstrated interest is more important now than ever in fields like computer science and engineering, and business, three of the most competitive majors overall. Let's see, if there are limited options, create your own opportunity. Form a pre-med club or form a business club. It doesn't necessarily have to be FBLA or DECA. You could just form a pre-business society at your club and bring in professionals to talk about their business successes. Two birds with one stone there, because you are not only demonstrating leadership and initiative, you're the president by default, but it's also demonstrating interest in business or whatever your major might be. Then if you changed your mind halfway through school, so maybe you thought you wanted to be a doctor and then suddenly you want to go into business, it's never too late to start demonstrating that interest. It's just important that you do, because you don't want the admissions officers to think you'll change your mind again after being admitted, especially to one of the competitive majors. So it's also important to frame things in the right way on your activity list. If possible, give everything a businessy spin. So maybe if you want to study business, of course, if, for example, the club was the environmental club, but you managed the budget for some events, focus more on the fact that you managed the budget or that you made posters for marketing, as opposed to focusing more on the environmental activities that took place. All right, leadership. Leadership is very important, especially for the more selective schools, but there are multiple kinds of leadership. You don't have to form a club and be the president to be a leader, to demonstrate leadership qualities. That would be entrepreneurship. You're starting something of your own and leading it. There's also intrapreneurship. So maybe you're just a member or a secretary of a particular club. You can still have an impact in the club without being the president necessarily. So as long as you're enacting positive change, that's all that matters. Speaking of president, don't try to be president of everything. There's very little benefit to chasing titles. In fact, a number of high schools limit the number of titles any one student can even hold. As I've mentioned, impact, much more important than involvement. And oftentimes independent activities can outshine established organizations. And what if you're shy? Start small. Start with your friends, start with your younger siblings. I had one student who was terribly, terribly shy, and she started out and she wanted to apply for dance programs and arts programs. She started out just learning YouTube videos and teaching her younger sister. And then that turned into her younger sister and her friends. And then that turned into people more in her neighborhood. And then she started giving tours on important dance sites in her city. And it just kind of evolved, and gradually she developed those skills, especially speaking in front of people or being a leader. Just start small. Community service, much like how you should not collect titles, president, secretary of everything. As mentioned before, don't do community service just to collect the hours, but accumulating hours that are targeted. So if you're going for pre-med, for example, and you collect hundreds of hours volunteering at a hospital, that's relevant. It totally makes sense. You're likely very passionate about it. Go for it. But if you're just going to the soup kitchen and mopping floors every week for your entire high school, maybe not relevant unless you're going into a field about maybe social work. So just be thoughtful, be careful, and be impactful with your community service. Or start a social enterprise. You don't have to go to the soup kitchen to do community service. You can start an organization that ultimately benefits people, like how I mentioned the workshops for children that don't have access to music education. Great example. Just helping people with your passion is a really successful way to boost your profile and also do some good. Arts, athletics, hobbies, all the other stuff. Don't give up on your passions. You know, if you enjoy art or theater or whatever it is, but you don't want to major in it, be sure that your balance of activities and your choice of activities reflects that. Don't give up on them, but maybe cut back on them. So I have a student who is a gymnast. She loves it. She would never be at the level to win national titles, but she was going to gymnastics club 5-6 days a week. Upon realizing that that wasn't really benefiting her profile, she focused her efforts elsewhere, cut back to 1 or 2 days a week, and now she does more with coaching. So now she has a leadership position. She still gets to enjoy what she loves, but it's not as much of a time demand. But if she were to be at the national level of gymnastics, that can actually benefit your profile, even if you're not pursuing something related to what you're performing in. As I mentioned before, in the awards and honors section, standing out from your peers catches their eye as much, if not more so than other ways. So it all depends. It depends on your possible achievement as well as the time demand. Speaking of time demand, athletics, they can take a lot of time and have very little impact on your profile overall. Most varsity sports meet just about every day per week. There are games and events and matches on the weekends. It's always a difficult conversation to have with my students, especially juniors that have played soccer or whatever sport their entire life. They love it, but they're on JV. They're just a regular member. Their team doesn't perform particularly well. It's hard to give up. But if giving it up allows you to build an amazing capstone that catches the attention of the admissions officer, to build demonstrated interest in your chosen major, or just reduces the stress enough so you can focus on preparation for college, it's worth it, and you can always pick it up later. Almost every university will have some form of either competitive sport or sport just for fun. So you can pick soccer up again anytime, or just play for fun with your friends. But again, it's all about how impactful is your involvement and how much time are you spending. Finally, hobbies. So anything can go on the activity list. If you play guitar for fun, but you never took a class and you never perform anywhere, but you spend time doing it and writing lyrics or whatever it is, that can certainly go on your activity list, as can anything else. So if you spend a lot of time caring for a sick family member, for example, that's absolutely an activity. It's something that takes up your time. And that's really all they want to know. It's giving the admissions officers context. So in addition to your academic performance, what do you do outside of school that takes up your time and pulls away from your ability to take tests or to study? So everything is fair game, all types of hobbies, any way you spend your time. Awards and honors, we've talked about this quite a bit. Helps you stand out from your peers. Scale is important. Choosing wisely, so some organizations, some competitions are much more competitive than others. Sometimes it can be advantageous to choose, for example, within FBLA, there are a number of different types of competitions. It could be advantageous to choose something that's maybe less popular because that might allow you to stand out that much more. Other types of competitions that are very competitive and require many years of crafting your skill could include speech and debate. A lot of students are drawn into those types of activities later on in high school, junior year, for example. Not the best time to jump into an activity that's hyper competitive with a large field of interested students. because standing out is that much more difficult. It also takes a lot of time to prepare for a speech and debate competition. So just be smart about the competitions you target. Starting early, of course, helps. So if you know that you want to go into a competitive field like computer science or engineering or business, starting as early as you can to craft those skills, join those clubs, take those classes, it will help you later on, for sure. Try again. And then finally, mentorship. You don't have to do it all on your own. Of course, attending webinars like this, great first step if this is the first step you're taking. But asking other people that have been in your shoes. You know, if you want to go into pre-med, talk to a doctor. If you want to go into education, talk to a teacher, all those types of things. Or through Crimson, you can get a mentor to help you specifically with building your extracurricular profile. And strategists, much like myself, can give you advice on how to choose between different activities and how best to spend your time. That also allows you to build a meaningful relationship with your mentors. Setting a schedule also helps. Your mentor can certainly aid in that. And right, don't limit mentorship. So for Crimson specifically, I've mentioned a few different things. Through the ECL program that we have, you have a dedicated extracurricular mentor, and they help you in various stages of your journey. So we start with foundation modules. These are especially for younger students. And we build those skills that you'll need to succeed later on. Then we also do project support. So as you're building a capstone project, something that highlights your passions as well as helps people, they guide you step by step through that entire process. You can also leverage the Crimson Network, very useful. And then professional discovery. So helping you find out which field to target, and give you access to professionals in your chosen fields. All right, so I've talked plenty. I think now it's time to hear from an actual student that has been through this process. In fact, he just finished the process himself in applying to schools this cycle. Got some great results. Keenan, how about I hand it over to you?
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Good evening. Like Brice mentioned, my name is Keenan, and I'm not sure why the camera's not working, but anyway, so my name is Keenan Carmenzana, and I'm a senior who lives in Southern Colorado. As Brice mentioned, in the fall after graduation, I'm humbled to announce that I will be attending Columbia University to join the class of 2024. Just a little bit of information about me. I, throughout the last 4 years, have taken International Baccalaureate, advanced placement courses, along with taking classes at a local university. So I've been able to dive into many different subject areas that solidify my interest. And on this slide, as you guys can see, this is one of my favorite quotes that I always like to share with everyone. It says, "Gaining knowledge is the first step to wisdom, and sharing it is the first step to humanity." And that is why I'm here today, is in order to share my knowledge and experience with you all about my experience with extracurriculars and just my overall journey to get into university. On the next slide, I would just I always ask people, particularly students, when they come up to me and they're like, "Keenan, I'm stressed out about this, I'm worried about this." But I say, what does being nervous mean to you? What is being nervous? Are you afraid? Do you feel like you are not prepared enough? Do you afraid that others will be better than you? But I always tell them that if you are nervous, it's a good thing because it means you care. If you aren't nervous, you would be unlikely to succeed. And so I always carry that with me, and I'd like to share that with everybody. As I say, it's the advice for a lifetime. If you're nervous, it's always a good thing. At the beginning of my high school career, I told myself that there were so many opportunities for me, but I struggled to put them into a giant puzzle in order for me to really figure out what my interests were, because I was 100% sure that I would become a mammologist and go into veterinarian studies. But as I've gone through high school, I have finally learned that political science is where my interests are. So in the fall, I will be majoring in political science with an emphasis on law, cultures, and societies on the pre-law track. Firstly, on this slide, as it reads, the framework for the future. I like to call the plans for students and for parents and other educators. The way to be prepared for the future is to have a plan. And at first, it might seem overwhelming, whether it's the amount of classes to take, the amount of advice that you're getting from people, things that you'll hear from other students who have graduated or other family members that you might be listening to. There's a lot to take in, but throughout high school, those 4 years really serve as the time for you to highlight your interest, maybe put your foot into something that you've never tried before. And who knows, maybe that will become your best interest. Inside the classroom, I think the classroom is the first seed that is planted for a student to understand their highest capabilities. Whether you're sitting in a history classroom learning about US history or learning about wars of the 19th century, that is really the time for students to spark that little bit of curiosity that they can carry with them in order to maybe find a new interest. Third, it is really important for students to reach out. Oftentimes, there are many people who will tell students, oh, don't overwhelm yourself, don't do this, or they only provide them with information about the big clubs. For example, National Honor Society, as Brice has mentioned, is a very common one. And it often overshadows some of the other opportunities that may be not only in the school community, but in the greater community in which the student lives as well. Lastly, it's really important for all people, whether it's a student and a parent and a counselor, a parent and another teacher or a student, to sit down and really take the time to look about your community, to see what other opportunities are available. Because if you just rely on what you've been told by your school administration, you might overlook some of the most important activities that could change the students' lives. Secondly, the openness of opportunity is what I like to call the way to really have a student understand their greatest potentials and how they can choose their activities for themselves. Number one is creating a theme. Many times throughout this presentation this evening, Brice has talked about passions. And I, now working with Crimson, understand that taking a passion with that spark of curiosity is the way to show a university that you are capable of succeeding at their university and bringing something that others may not be able to bring to the table. The individuality is key, and extracurricular activities is just one way to do that. And third, lastly, applying strengths. The student knows, whether it's from entering freshman year or finishing up junior year, where their strengths are. And if you use your strengths and put them to the best of their use, it will pay off in the end. But the majority of the time, students who are skilled at computers or skilled at public speaking, they let their strengths go away. They push them to the side and they're unable to demonstrate that they are talented. And on the next slide, as everyone can see, one of the major things that I have learned throughout high school is the importance of interdisciplinary, whether that's the assortment of classes you're taking, the assortment of extracurricular activities that you're taking part in. Everything that a student uses in high school should be interdisciplinary. If you're applying the knowledge from a classroom into an extracurricular activity, if you're applying the reading that you're doing to a classroom to spark your interest for a new extracurricular activity, these can all manifest together into the overall goal. Oftentimes, students become afraid. They don't know how many extracurricular activities they should be doing because of the time. Time is of the essence, as the old cliche has it. And it's true. There's only 24 hours in the day, and we all need to eat, and we all need to sleep, and we all have to go to school. But time management is a very hard skill to learn. But by joining extracurricular activities and experiencing some of those times that might be stressful, it's for a way for the student to really ultimately understand their highest capacities, whether it's maybe taking Tuesdays off. I go home, I'll do my homework, and then maybe Wednesday, I stay after school for 2 hours, working on a project or in a club, helping other students, tutoring, as Brice has mentioned. During this entire time, there has to be balance. Without balance, the student's success becomes overshadowed. They need to be able to take the time in the classroom, take the time for their personal life and their extracurriculars, and put it together in a triangle. All 3 points have to be balanced or it does not work. The academics and the test scores come first. supplemented and coupled with the extracurricular activities. If the student is struggling in their academic courses, they need to really focus on them and maybe take a break from extracurricular activities or find another activity that can help them improve in the academic atmosphere. Maybe that's going to a social club after school for 30 minutes, getting that weight off of their shoulders by expressing their thoughts to other classmates or to other teachers. But there's always different ways, and it's different for each student. Next, one of the most difficult aspects of this entire extracurricular process is what activities do I choose? If your school has an abundance of clubs, chess club, National Honor Society, key clubs, speech and debate, the list can go on forever. And it might feel as if the student is going to be at the bottom of a pit and there's no way to climb out of it with all the extracurricular activities. But the way to do it is take the passions, take the theme that you have formulated around yourself and set a goal at the end. Goal setting is, I don't know, some people might say it's cliche to set a goal or your goals may be too far out there or unachievable, but I would argue against that and say if you don't have a goal for your extracurricular activity, how do you prove to a university that it was worth the time you spent? The 5 hours that you spent every Friday evening working with your other classmates, why? At the end, if you don't have a goal, if you don't have a major spot at the end of the tunnel, it all will collapse in the end. And the university is going to be like, okay, you spent your time doing this, but why? Quantify it, quantify it. Their numbers are one of the most powerful ways to demonstrate to the university admissions officers that this student has put the effort in. They've succeeded in order to apply their knowledge and make sure that their time was spent well. Awards and achievements. It's always really exciting to get an award or an achievement for any extracurricular activity. And I think sometimes students think, oh, if I just got the city award, it's okay. But if that's the highest you can get for that club, emphasize that point, that you made it to the highest point. Maybe if you're in speech and debate, you get a national honor. Emphasize that. Those humble achievements, it's not bragging. It's a way for you to prove that you've spent the time to do it and you've excelled at it. And just by working with your mentors at Crimson is a way that they can help you polish that in order to make it stand out, but not to be flashy or come off as being very pretentious. And then the bottom point here on this slide is the tangible evidence, the quantifying of the numbers. In any extracurricular activity, if there's one way for you to prove how much effort you put in, whether it's showing your record for baseball, showing the amount of community service hours you have gained, showing the amount of energy savings at your school, the amount, a grant, if your school got a grant, those are all ways to show the admissions officers that you've dedicated this time. And here on the next slide, I've created a plan for my extracurriculars, and we'll just go through it fairly briefly. What I've done is organize them into 4 different categories around the different themes that I've proposed. Communications and politics is one of my greatest interests. Environment and energy is another great of my interests. And then arts, and then volunteering and community service, which I think it's very important to serve your community in all these different ways. First, if we look at the first box in the top, communications and politics, something I have not mentioned is one of my goals in high school I found out was once I graduated from high school and university, I would love to become a speechwriter in government. And this was one way for me to start that, to plant the seed in order to grow and put my foot into the door. And the first thing I did was join speech and debate as a freshman. Freshman year, I started on the theatrical sides of speech and debate. And as I've gone older through sophomore, junior, and senior year, I've been able to go into a new event called Informative Speaking, where I get to share my ideas about new innovations and cultures around the world that I feel empowered by when I leave the room, because I know that spreading a message and using your voice is a way to change the world. That's my philosophy. Second, YMCA Youth in Government was a way for me to be able to get firsthand experience working in the legislative process. During the end of my junior year, I actually did a campaign to run for the state editor-in-chief. And I was excited to announce that I was elected as the editor-in-chief position. So I was able to get that leadership position that you can highlight in your profile. And then to supplement that, I provided the academic admissions officers with numbers that showed my interest, what I did those few weeks working at the youth in government, in order to make sure I'm putting myself before the activity. You don't want the admissions officers to be described about, oh, this is youth in government, this is blah, 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 but then they don't have the information about what you contributed. Always put yourself. You are the person. They never get to meet you. They probably will never get to see your face, but you need to put your face on the paper, and that's a way that you can do that. Third, politics club. During my sophomore year, an upperclassman started the club, and once he graduated, he asked me if I would like to sit on the board for it. And since then, we've been able to lead a voter registration campaign, many candidate forums in my community. Just another way that I can combine my speech skills and my interest in politics together to create a new activity. Second to bottom one, the internship with President of the Senate. During my junior year, I was taking advanced placement government and politics. And my teacher came up to me and said, hey, Keenan, they're doing this volunteer opportunity with a local candidate that's running to serve my state. And I said, oh, okay, great. And I started volunteering, did about 50 hours with them. And then they asked if I wanted to do an internship. And in the end, this gentleman was elected a president of the Senate, and I was able to put that in my application that I supported the campaign to get him there. And mind you, this was during my sophomore and junior year, so it doesn't just necessarily have to mean when you're an upperclassman as a senior. You can start earlier. And most recently, at my school, they needed somebody to fill in for mock trial, and I was able to step in at the last minute once everything was settled with college admissions, extracurriculars. So I'm still able to spend my time doing things with my friends and other classmates that I would love to do and support them. Below that is the arts. I've been in the arts since I was in 4th grade. I love theater, acting, singing, dancing, musical theater, and I wanted to highlight in my application. One, by showing I was a student taking classes or other programs, and secondly, by taking my knowledge and becoming an instructor and director for elementary students. I took away a few hours from my time of learning the dances and the new acting methods and applied it to teach the younger generations because I want to pass that interest on to younger kids. And then the last one in the arts category is an activity that's called VIP Camp that's held in the summer. It's a 5-week program that I can go out and teach students all the different ways, not necessarily just about theater, but about growing up and how they find their character, build their responsibilities for middle school students. In the top right box, environment and energy, my school, I decided to start a conservation and sustainability coalition at my school because I felt that the environment was put to the side at my school. We were not recycling. We did not have anything in place to conserve energy. And with that, I was able to get our school a grant to produce new LED materials and to make the classrooms more environment friendly. And the last one, this goes back to what Brice was mentioning earlier about having a personal project. And this was my personal project. It's called This Is Our Community, Community of Innovation. It was a series of forums that I combined all of my interests, arts, environment, and communications together to hold annual meetings where people could come and listen to lecturers talk about their expertise in the field. We had art performances. We had some of the candidates for our state government come and speak, and it was a really powerful set of events. And in the bottom box, volunteering community service. Since I was at a very young age, it was instilled in me that volunteering and serving the community is one way that you can show your love for others. Whether it's serving at your local animal shelters, working at the soup kitchen. And for me, it was starting a new organization called Operation Donation, the charitable effort, which I actually started in 8th grade, and it's been successful ever since. We've been able to collect donations from clothes and toiletry items and donate them to underprivileged areas of my community, which I'm very humbled to do. And then, of course, National Honor Society and Key Club, where I've gained numerous hours of community service. I think that's all the information I have. I know Brice mentioned something about references or letters of recommendation. I would just like to mention one thing about that is at the end of a student's 11th grade or junior year, it's critical that you start asking your teachers as soon as possible, because if you can enter your senior year with those materials, you'll have that upper leg of being on top of it, because at times when it becomes overwhelming, you'll have that extra step to be more prepared. And with that, I'd like to say thank you to all of you. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks, Keenan. All right. Let's see. Let me just reopen this one more time. Okay. One second. There's something I wanted to add in here. Here we go. Okay. Just had to quick change something around real quick. Let me share my screen again. Oh, sorry, not that one, this one. Here we go. Okay, next steps. So what you can do now that you've learned all of this and you kind of understand what it takes to build a successful extracurricular profile, you can get a little bit of help from Crimson. So you can sign up for a free assessment with an academic advisor. They're some of our experts. They can help you sort of identify what you might need, personalize your package, figure out what it would take for you to get from point A to point B to your goal university. And your parents do have to attend that one. But it's a great way to figure out what can be done, what you can do, and how you can get some help. Then, in order to do that, sign up for a consultation, and you can see the link right there at the bottom if you want to sign up right away. Great way to get some information. Now, I'll open it up to Q&A. If there are questions, I see we've got some here. Let me open these up. Okay, does performing at prestigious concert halls count as an honor? Yes, absolutely. So any sort of competitive thing that you've attended or been a part of or put a lot of effort into, that can absolutely count as an honor. It could also count as an activity. So in putting together your application, you can be a little creative with where you put things and how you phrase things and how it all comes together. That's a big part of my job, actually, is figuring out what to put where, what to emphasize, how to highlight it in the best way possible. A lot of things walk that fine line between honor and award. So for example, if you were to be accepted to the Telluride Association summer program, you could also call that being accepted as a Telluride scholar, in which case that could go more towards the honors side. Honors or awards, or it could be an activity because it's a summer program and you can highlight what you did within that summer program. So it can really go a few different ways, but great question. Overall, I would say yes, but it doesn't have to. And then Keenan, let's see, there is actually a question for you. Are you still here? Are you on mute?
Yes,
Oh, great. So this one's for you. It says, Keenan, you are so inspirational. I agree. And how did you meet with your Crimson team? How did that all work? Was it all on video? And did you feel like that was effective or as effective as meeting in person? What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, thank you for calling me inspirational. Working with Crimson, the first thing I did was look out for, when I found them online, I met with my first mentor, and ever since then, once we got all the paperwork done and we started settling in, I was able to meet one-on-one with each of my mentors as my progress went along, whether it was meeting Brice, who was my extracurricular mentor, or meeting my summer application advisor. Each of them was introduced to me by Crimson, and we would have an initial meeting. We would discuss our plans with each other, get to know our attributes to make sure that we bonded really quickly to produce the best applications possible, or just and create relationships that were wonderful. Yes, it was all in video through different websites such as Zoom or Crimson's other applications that they utilize. It was all done online. And I felt it was just as beneficial as if it were going to a coffee shop to sit down and speak with anyone. Working online was a way that we could communicate over long distance. If there was, like for me with extracurriculars, I was very busy, and it was a way that we could create times to meet up with each other and ensure that the accessibility was always present. If I needed something from Crimson, the turnaround rate for answers was very rapid. And so I think the online communication was great.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. All right, next question. Super important question, very timely as well. My student's school is going all online due to the virus. Should we hold off on Crimson or should he start? He has a lot of extra time now. How will this be handled? Big topic right now. I'm sure everybody's very familiar with the effects that the coronavirus is having, cancellations, not able to go to large public gatherings. This could certainly affect a lot of aspects of building an extracurricular profile. So first I want to address that. Before I get to the question, let me jump in on the coronavirus topic. So if something is canceled, if your plans get, if a wrench gets thrown into your plans and you can't actually follow through with something you had built, so you spent so much time building, it's important to first keep track of that, because the additional information section can be a great way to briefly address the fact that something out of your control affected the completion of something you had worked so hard for. But more importantly than addressing it on the application is finding an alternative and finding a way to express all of that effort in a way that's still productive given the constraints of the coronavirus. So this question is a great example. The school is moving from in-person to online. You could do the same with many extracurricular activities. You could, taking Keenan's project as an example, instead of hosting the forum in person, it could be hosted online, or it could be recorded and posted to YouTube. Lots of different things you can do. If you're lucky enough to be interested in computer science, doing independent projects from home, great way to continue building your extracurricular profile. Or business, you can start an e-commerce store, sell things online. People don't want to go to stores to shop anyway, so this could be a really good opportunity for your online store. And then I guess to address the question directly, so if your student is going to be attending school online, he or she will very quickly be familiar with the online format, which is actually very similar to how Crimson works. And if there is a lot of extra time, there's more time to meet with mentors, more time to get assistance from strategists like myself. And why hold off? I think now would be actually the best time instead of having to compete with a school schedule. Okay, next question. Will you be working with me specifically? How does Crimson decide on a counselor for a student? So maybe you'll be working with me. It all depends on the personality match. So when new students join, they go through an onboarding process, which includes a personality assessment, and you're matched then with a strategist that either is complementary or similar to you, and also one that has helped students in similar situations. So if one particular strategist has expertise in helping with pre-med students build their profiles, and you're a pre-med student, it might make more sense for you to work with that person instead of another. So it all depends, but long answer short, maybe, hopefully. And okay, next question. So does Crimson help a student with a personal project? I'm not sure how to go about it or what I should do. 100% yes. So the extracurricular mentor is the person that would work with a Crimson student in building out everything. So they go from the brainstorming stage, discussing passions, working on your extracurriculars you already have in place at school, making those as impactful as possible, and then putting steps in place to design and complete a personal project of your very own. You definitely do not need to already have one in mind when you join Crimson. We essentially walk you through the entire process. So if you're not sure what to do, if you don't even know what your passion is, that's perfectly fine because we help with that too. All right, next is from someone in Colombia. Hello, Daniel. SAT scores. So how to manage academics with extracurriculars, as well as SAT scores. So I did not take the SAT. I took the ACT instead. I got a 36. I won't ask Keenan to share his SAT score. That is entirely up to him if he wants to. But in terms of balancing that with your academics, with extracurriculars, it's exactly as Keenan highlighted when he was going through his story. It's all about time management. So creating a plan, keep sticking to it as much as possible. If you don't already use a planner or an organizer or a calendar, buy one, get one, and use it every day. And don't just chart out, you know, the things you have to do, map out exactly what takes up your time. So if you need time to relax or to eat or to call your mom, walk home, map out all of those things for an entire week. Then at the end of the week, of a typical week, then at the end of the week, you can see where your time was used more efficiently, where it wasn't used more efficiently, if you have time to add in something extra, or if you're overloaded and need to cut back on some things. But that's the best thing is managing your time as meticulously as possible, and then getting help from somebody who can maybe give you some advice on where to focus your time a little bit better. It's not about necessarily working harder, it's about working smarter. So just being efficient with your time. What is the enrollment process? So I have briefly flashed ways to sign up for a consultation. That's the best way. I'll put it back up again, but I can't figure out how to display the questions at the same time as sharing my screen. So in a second, I'll put it back up. But the best way would be to sign up for a consultation, talk to an academic advisor, get the advice that you want from them. They can give you some options about joining Crimson, and then you can make the decision. Let's see, Keenan, next question is for you. What was the moment like when you got in early to Columbia, and did you film a reaction video?
So when I found out I got into Columbia, I thought it was a mistake. I was dead, and I accidentally opened an email from them, but it looked like it was a spam email, and I clicked on it, and it starts playing the traditional Columbia entrance music with the alma mater playing with the Lions. And I was like, oh, what is this? I didn't even realize Columbia admissions had been out. And I was home alone, and I opened it, and I was like, this cannot be real. And I immediately called both of my parents and FaceTimed them and was like, so when you get home, I have exciting news for you, because I wasn't going to tell them over the phone. But I did not film a reaction video. I'll just hold those memories in my heart. But yeah, there were some happy tears.
Of course, good moment for sure. Okay, so I've shared my screen again. If you can see right there, the last bullet point, visit crimson.as.me. That is a great way to sign up for a consultation right away. Another question, I can also answer this one, or Keenan, you can too. Keenan, who is your strategist?
So I actually, Brice was my main strategist, but yes, along Brice, I had a powerhouse of members from the Crimson organization who have helped me, whether it was writing, as I previously mentioned, summer applications, creating my personal project, and then having a coordinator for all of my Crimson people working together was just a way for me to ensure that the communication was on point with everyone, to ensure that I was satisfied with it, the other strategists were satisfied, to ensure that my success would be at the end.
Mm-hmm. Right, so there are a number of different people that work on any given student's team. I was Keenan's strategist. But the strategist kind of has an endless, a limitless role, I guess you could say. So they advise on all different types of things. I believe earlier Keenan said I gave some advice on extracurriculars. I also definitely helped him make some decisions there. But everybody on the team is a useful contribution. Education coordinators, that's the person Keenan was just talking about, that kind of oversees the whole process, make sure it's seamless, make sure there's no issues, coordinates tutors and things like that. And then you have an application mentor that helps with all of your essays for all of your universities that you have Crimson assistance with, and additional essay support that goes beyond just that application mentor. So lots of good stuff. Hold on, there's another question. I have to stop sharing my screen again. Let's see, Keenan again. What would you say it was that differentiated your application to Columbia from all of the other students? So what do you think made you stand out?
Although I cannot be certain, because there is no magic spell that you can cast on your application. As I've said multiple times, it's the passion. You have to get to the heart of the undergraduate admissions officers, show them that you're passionate, show them that you have a plan for what you want to do. For me, I put in my application that I wanted to be a speechwriter in the government. I felt that Columbia was the way for me to do that. And then the culmination of everything together, the extracurricular activities, my test scores, my grades, everything together, I think what was put my application in the pile for acceptance.
Exactly. Everything Keenan did was at a very high level. He always challenged himself to do more, to do better. And he did an excellent job balancing that with the academic demands. So his academic transcript is essentially flawless. And then when you add a high level of achievement in a number of areas that speak to his strengths on top of that, it's a recipe for success, certainly. And he started early and worked hard. Brice, what did you do when you found out that Keenan got into Columbia? I also freaked out. It was equally or close to as equally a happy moment for me as it was for him. So in working so closely with students for so long, I mean, the strategist more than anyone maybe on the Crimson team gets to know the student extremely well. So by the end, it's not just, you know, strategist and student, it feels much more like a close friend. So when he got in, I was beyond happy. And his early result was the first one to come in. So he was the first one to give me news on his acceptance out of all of my students. And that was a great way to kick off the results cycle for sure. Thrilled, super proud of Keenan for sure. All right, sorry that this has gone on for 15 extra minutes. I hope it has been useful. I don't see any other questions. Any last questions anybody wants to ask? Let me share my screen one more time so you guys can see that link again. Right. Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank everybody for stopping by, for checking out the webinar, for listening to Keenan and I talk for an hour. If you have any questions, or if there's any other way that you'd like to get some support, feel free to check out a free consultation, and hope to hear from you soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you.